Day 2 of the November 2004 7-day retreat in Springwater. Yesterday there was quite a bit of talk and questioning about fear of aging, fear of dying, maybe connected with disability now or taking care of others who are getting disabled. And of course the mind immediately begins spinning. How will I be when this happens to me? And the fear that this thought produces. And one person called it fear of loss, or grieving, the grieving of loss. One doesn't have something that one had before, maybe a relationship, good times, something that was a lot of attachment to a person, usually, or a situation, a house, a landscape one has loved and is not going there anymore, has moved away. And then maybe in a retreat it turns into a question, how do I deal with this grief, this fear? Whereas normally, when we're not having quiet time devoted just to sitting with all the thought masses that come up and the emotion masses that are triggered by these thoughts, here it gels into the question, how do I deal with this? Is there a way of being with the grief of loss or the fear of aging? And we've touched it already in two talks and meetings. Can one be quiet in the middle of all of this ongoing thought and body sensation stuff? Be aware or become aware. Wake up to the fact that one remembrance of a person, of a past event, one remembrance mobilizes this body into all kinds of sensations. Grief, fear, anger. People have told me this who have lost a spouse or partner. At first, grief of loss, and then anger that the person left me. I couldn't ever understand this, and I have not had that particular emotion at the loss of Kyle. There was no anger. If anything, after a while, it took a year and a half or so to feel some relief. I don't have to worry about him anymore. Don't have to take care of him. A certain sense of freedom. Until some disability catches up with you. There's sometimes the thought how nice it would be if he was here to take care of me, but he couldn't take care of me if he was here. So I'm glad he isn't, because it would be a burden on him and his condition. So how to deal with these fears and angers and sadnesses? loss or of imagined loss. And many people who are afraid of aging are not particularly aging, maybe a little bit of white hair, some wrinkles, but that's not aging. That's the fear, oh, it's going to be a whole head of white hair, or a face full of wrinkles. One thing, whenever you look in the mirror, I learned this from a filmmaker. There was a German filmmaker, I don't know whether you've heard of her, she just died at the age of 100 plus. Leni Riefenstahl was her name. Very defamated in Germany because she was Hitler's photographer. Very ingenious woman. Could make marvelous movies of the Olympic Games in '36. She was the first person to really capture more than just who's winning, but she was enthralled with muscular bodies, particularly of men, and to show the running and the disc throwing and the art or the beauty of it reminded her of Greek sculpture. So Leni told the photographer who was taking her picture and relating her life, she says, always take a woman with a light right face on. Never shine it from the side or from the back, because then she'll look wrinkly. But have it come right at her face and she will look youthful. It's true. I've got a mirror with lights right on top of it. And I don't recognize myself when I look into that mirror. So maybe if you're afraid of aging just because the way you look in the mirror, fix your lights. But when there is really loss, or there's really a creeping up a disability, not just imagined, not just the product of fantasy and imagination, but a real thing, then observe. What are the thoughts that go through the mind? What are the thoughts that they give birth to? Because every thought gives birth to more thoughts, unless there is some insight, some light thrown on this process of thought giving birth to more thought, and each thought triggering emotions and body sensations. That is an imperative to become aware of that. So you're not in charge of yourself, but aware of what is going on. Have the light shine on the process of thinking and emoting, and worrying and grieving and angering, and maybe calming down. It took me a while after Kyle's death till this was fully grasped, fully realized. In the beginning, there was no way of halting the Niagara of thoughts. Everything reminded of Kyle. Everything. Because we'd lived together so long and so well, there was just nothing that didn't remind this mind-body, which we call me, of Kyle. And inevitably with the memory came the pain of grief, sort of convulsive pain in the solar plexus. Really disagreeable, but here it was. There was nothing to be done about it except learn about it, watch it. And then something changed. In watching a thought arise, and foreseeing, if you will, predicting inwardly that this thought was going to give rise to pain and misery, and not going with that, staying here. Because staying with the thought process of one thought after another and then the physical emotions, that is not exactly being here. It is and it isn't. It is away from this instant of presence. You could say, well, that happens in the presence too. Yes, it does. And if it is a wholesome presence, then it's not just the pain of remembrance. Then that takes place in a vast space of awareness, which has built into it wisdom, intelligence. And that wisdom, intelligence can say no to the perpetuation of thoughts and emotions that are given rise to by the thoughts. It's an amazing capacity of this awareness wisdom to stay here with whatever one is doing at the moment, writing something, taking a walk, cooking or washing dishes, cleaning the sink. Staying with that, not forcefully or repressively, but intelligently, with the clear realization, moving away from this into the video room of remembrances, brings pain and suffering and narrowness of presence. There's a little bit of presence, but not much. And then all the byproducts of feeling sorry for oneself and wanting others to feel sorry for one. There's a big element there. And when you are sick or ailing or have lost someone, there's always, particularly in this country, an amazing outpouring of sympathy. People offering help from all sides. I have told it sometimes in the talk how the hospice society who we had asked for help in Kyle's dying days, they kept in touch with me and sent me regular publications, newsletters, or reminders of what stage of grieving I was finding myself in. And my first thought was, well, how do you know? How do you know where I am? And I didn't read it anymore. It was no help. You need to be with yourself and not have somebody else tell you how you feel. Although it must be working with a lot of people. It must be a good feeling when somebody else commiserates or seems to commiserate with your grieving process. So I'm not saying this for other people, but for myself, this was not needed. It was a distraction from when there is pain, suffering, self-pity, when that takes over to become very quiet in the midst of that sort of more and more quiet, more and more motionless listening. Inwardly, outwardly, it's no difference anymore between inward and outward. Awareing wisely what is happening. And this wide awareing, this wisdom, has an amazing right action to it. Not necessarily that you know what to do or undertake, maybe just the fact that you're there and awareing, in touch with the conditions inside and out, is enough. That is already action. It's good to hear and to wonder whether you can find this out yourself. Because often people say, well, what good does it do me? I go to these retreats, nothing much happens, I'm not doing much. Does it help? Is it any good for me? Be so enormously patient and hear from others who have experienced this or are experiencing it, that just being here quietly with what is, not knowing what to do about it, but open and in touch, that is its own right action, which has a marvelous way about it. Particularly when we're not so eager to know it and interrupt this weaving of presence. So, sitting out there on the black chair or lying back, which is a wonderful new thing for me to spend sitting time or transform sitting time into lying time. It was not a lot of meditative presence. I was very dreamy, trancy, not in good shape, didn't have a good night. Sort of this vertigo was operating, the dizziness, and was trying to collect some thoughts, but it was totally impossible to collect any thoughts of what to talk about. So I let it go. A little worry. There was a little worry, which is totally unknown to me from all these years of giving talks, to worry about the talk. I would usually forget about that there was a talk coming up, and then seeing this chair and the microphone, oh, there's a talk. But this time I was concerned because I don't want to let anybody down who has come here to hear a talk in this marvelous context of Springwater. And I truthfully didn't know whether something would come out or not, but so far it has worked every time. It's beyond any comprehension, any intellectual comprehension, because the mind is drugged with medication, sleepy, tired, achy, etc. And yet, sitting here and quietly listening, awareing, the whole universe is here, ready to be seen and heard and talked about, or talked from. Is not really about. That's what we usually do when we give a lecture. We talk about something. But here, the presence is talking itself, which is an amazing grace, if you will. So you may think or say, I hear you, to be with what's there, but how do I do it? All that is happening is thinking, not even about the situation, but about something completely different. What I'll do when I get home, or what I could be doing rather than wasting my time here. Or I don't want to be so negative. There's a lot of positive thoughts. I may be accumulating merits by doing this. Sort of a chuckle of recognition. Because even if one can't understand, one has heard that there is something meritorious about spending time sitting. And there is, in the way that we just talked about. It is almost mysterious. This being with oneself, which is the whole. Not opposed to it and not doing something about it, but part of the whole thing. Breathing, attending, the sounds, the distant traffic and motor, breathing. Do you feel your breathing? It's not really yours, but you feel breathing? Do you have a charge behind it that I ought to be breathing yogically, meditatively, zen-y? Or just wonder what is breathing and let it be. Let it do what it will. Surprising, maybe it takes some years to find that the breathing happens entirely on its own, and when you're very, very attentive, very much listening, awareing, there's very little breathing in our conventional way. It is not at all forced. It's just the organism providing itself with whatever it needs. After a pause in breathing, then suddenly a very wonderful deep breath. The brain has asked for some oxygen or something, and it comes. One doesn't have to think about it. The body has its amazing wisdom how to operate when it is not under pressure. And also to avoid fallacies of predicting. And I know yesterday I took a walk, when was it? After the group. I used to walk after supper, but now it's dark. It's dark after supper. So after the group there was wonderful, bright color, such clarity. The hills were so close, and the ground. And it seemed as though I was flying up that hill. I haven't experienced anything like this in months. And I thought, oh, I've made a big step forward. To abstain, I'm learning, abstain from any kind of predictions. Because when you have a particularly good and forceful, strong, I don't mean forcefully willed, but full of energy flow, that may not last. On the contrary, it may mean that after that you're feeling more achy, more drained. And to just flow with that and not stick with any expectations that something will stay this way or will remain it. To sort of the mind and body purifying itself from its own predictions. So it can be more and more just with this moment as it is, not as it is expected to be or wanted to be. Because with expectation and wanting comes disappointment. When things don't come as predicted. It's a setup. And why set oneself up for anything when it's totally sufficient to be here, this moment, as it is? Can we do that without doing it? Just being here, this moment? People tell me that when something like this is said in a talk, then there's so many thoughts that go through the mind. One can't be with this moment, one thinks. There's all these thoughts, and then the super thought, what's wrong with me? When will I ever be without all of this garbage? It's a very useless thought. It's a setup again, self-evaluation. Whatever comes, whatever goes, let it come and go. It doesn't matter. There is more going on in this universe than these random thoughts. Let them be, let them come, let them go, and be in touch with something much vaster, which is not a thought. What is it? I don't know. No word can capture it. The sound of the movement of trees and branches and roof and woodwork. It's not the words. Do you realize it's not the word wind? It's not the word trees. It's not any word. It is just, what is it? And listening without knowing. Knowing comes up because the brain is programmed to know. It needs and wants to know. And with that, it divides up what is whole and indivisible into so many fragments. And a moment of silence, no thoughts to describe it, and where are the fragments? There's just one whole listening and awareing. And then does thought come up again to try to know it and make pieces out of it that it can store and mull over or put together into a future mosaic. Are we here? Are we here? Can't be anyplace else. we will end here for today.